This is Twit.
Google plans to replace its Nexus line of phones with a new branding and new concept for how the phones get built. In an exclusive on The Information, senior reporter Amir Efrati said that the new Android Silver handsets will be high-end phones built by multiple handset makers to Google's exacting specifications. Amir Efrati joins us now to talk about his exclusive. Welcome, Amir. So, Amir, how is the Android Silver strategy different from the Nexus strategy?
Well, the Nexus program was always very niche, right? And it was mainly benefiting the companies that were participating in it because they got to go live inside of Google for a few months, work with the Android team, really create a good device, and then they could go actually and do their own device later that had nothing to do with Nexus. So like the LG G2, for instance, is, I'm sure, taken a lot of learnings from the Nexus phones that LG has worked on with Google. But now, it's really about selling devices in high volumes in stores. Nexus was sold mainly online, right? Always a niche thing, didn't sell that much. And Google really wants to take greater control of the ecosystem, particularly dealing with issues like bloatware, dealing with issues like component fragmentation, and dealing with Samsung, frankly, trying to find a way to benefit non-Samsung Android makers in a way that creates multiple powerful players in the ecosystem, so it's not all controlled by Samsung. They did want Samsung to participate in this program, but as you might expect, Samsung views it as a very big threat to have numerous premium Android phones out there that compete with Samsung's line of Galaxy phones.
Now, who are the likely candidates? You mentioned that Samsung is unlikely to participate, at least initially. Who are some of the companies that might be on board right from the get-go?
So we get into a lot of these details in the piece, which you should check out on theinformation.com, but definitely we know that LG is on board for this. There are going to be a lot of other good candidates. There are plenty of companies out there that do phones in high volumes, but maybe don't have a premium consumer brand and would like more of one. There are plenty of Chinese OEMs that kind of fit that bill. But the companies that have made an effort to create a consumer brand and a high-end phone, like a Samsung, like a Sony, like an HTC even, despite the fact that it's struggling mightily, they are not the best candidates for this because they would view this as competitive with their current offerings. It's really important to mention here that the wireless carriers are a key part of this program. This is all about spending hundreds of millions of dollars or more to create these kiosks within wireless carrier stores and really train people to sell these Android Silver devices directly to consumers. These devices are supposed to be special, right? They're supposed to be really good. And I think that we're going to see a lot of interesting features such as waterproofing and personal voice recognition and all sorts of things like that to make these devices stand out. But it's going to be a really big effort. You are definitely going to hear a lot about this over the next year or so.
Now, to me, this is kind of tragic news if this is, in fact, going to replace the Nexus line. The Nexus line was kind of like a tinkerer's phone. It was very open. People could mess around with it. It's very low cost, very bare bones, not particularly elegant, but for hardware hackers or programmers or anybody who wanted a phone that they could really play with, the Nexus phones were perfect for that. Why do you think it is that they don't have both the Android Silver and the Nexus lines in tandem?
Well, I don't know about how they will sort of phase out the Nexus side of this. But as you know, LG was working on a Nexus 6 device, and now this new program came about, and they sort of had to change their plans. One thing we don't know much about is the tablet side. Obviously, there's the Nexus 7 and the Nexus 10 out there. And, my understanding right now is that the Silver program focuses mainly on phones. As you know, phones are getting bigger and bigger. There are phablets, right? And so I don't know that there's going to have to be a specific emphasis on tablets there. But I think, Nexus is great. Nexus is definitely played a very, very useful role. But like I said, it was mainly for the benefit of these OEMs to get really good at making Android devices. And these things did not sell very well in the retail market. There will always be tinkerer phones, right? And that's what Android is all about. I'm sure there'll continue to be Google Play versions of these devices. But this is really about getting serious about selling devices in high volumes and starting to make some money off of Android. I mean, Android is not a huge business in and of itself for Google. It's, a lot of people have these phones. They don't really use them that much for apps and services and other things. That's well documented, right? The iPhone user is a user that is more tech savvy, has more money, is doing more things. They want to target those users who can do that, and really show people the capabilities of these phones so they can generate more revenue.
And you mentioned in your piece that in exchange for these companies going along and doing things Google's way, Google's going to invest a lot of money in promotion and stuff, up to $1 billion, I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very serious effort, and that's really the carrot here is marketing support. This has actually been a really big issue for the past couple of years as Samsung has risen up. You have a situation where a lot of these other companies like HTC, they've gone to Google and said, guys, please help us. We're getting killed out there. We cannot possibly keep up with Samsung, which is just covering the airways with ads. What can you do to help us? And Andy Rubin, the prior head of Android until the beginning of last year, he's a very Darwinistic approach. So he said, okay, well, only the strong will survive. And we will have this Nexus program that will help companies like LG and Asus and others to compete. But now you have a situation where Sundar Pichai is the leader. He's much more of a willing to listen kind of a person, has a lot more empathy for such partners. And I think he's been a bit more open to finding ways to help them. It can be argued that this program is not an ideal way to help those companies that really want to have a strong brand, because you have to basically submit to very stringent requirements. You can't do a lot of bloatware, or you can't do customization of software like these companies like to do. So you're kind of a bit more commoditized. I think that's the fear, and that's why this program is probably best for those companies that are frankly not huge consumer brands right now, and have not invested a lot in that.
And I suspect they're going to find that the phones, in addition to being subsidized with all this branding help by Google, are going to be very popular because people seem to love Google Play Edition phones and Nexus phones because they don't have the bloatware, because they have an emphasis on the Google apps, which are excellent on all platforms. So that'll be an interesting development. And as I understand from your story, this is expected to come out sometime next year, but we don't have anything solid on that. Amir Efrati, I want to thank you for coming on Tech News today, and once again, excellent scoop.
Thanks very much.
All right, you can find Amir Efrati at theinformation.com and also on Twitter at Amir, A-M-I-R.